Brother Michael, I'm so excited to introduce you, and I'm going to turn it over to you at this time.
All right, thank you. It's nice to be here. It's nice to see so many of you and lots of familiar faces in here. So what we're going to do today is talk about ATL. And for those of you in a leadership position, I'll send this PowerPoint out. Feel free to take what I'm doing with you and just then do it again with your staff. I'm happy for you to do that. And I feel like I'm hopeful that you'll find what I'm talking about to be kind of transferable. I'm just going to take a second here to take over the screen and put up a PowerPoint. Can everybody, can I get a couple thumbs up? Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, so we're good to go. So we're going to talk about ATL in action because I think it's a bit elusive sometimes. I think it's one of those things that can often feel like an add-on. And I think that it can be really practical and especially important right now in this strange reality of education. So this is my agenda-ish. It's ish because who knows what's going to happen here, but this is the plan. I want to talk a little bit about how I think about ATL, how I was on a research team that did some ATL work in Nova Scotia, where I'm from. And for those of us in IB land, it comes up all the time. I'm going to put you into a breakout group with people from a whole bunch of different programs so you can talk about it and think about how it spirals. I actually think those of us in DP have a lot to learn from people from PYP about how to do this well. So I think it's important to kind of mix. Then I want to talk about how to plan with ATL in mind, because the thing that I know of this is that everybody is already doing it, but it's a matter of popping it out and realizing that we're doing it. Step one, and step two, to make sure our students realize that we're doing it. So I want to give some strategies for how to very easily plan with it in mind. I don't want you to think of it as an add-on. I want you to think of it as highlighting something that's already there. Then I'm going to give you some time to practice that, kind of share some of your best practices and some final thoughts in conclusion. We'll see. We'll see how it all shakes out here today. So diving right in. What is it anyway? So first of all, and I'm gonna give you some, whoops, didn't mean to do that. I'm gonna give you some documents that I think are important for you to work with. So don't feel like this is a list to memorize. To me, the ATL stuff is stuff that you're constantly referencing. You're not going to memorize this list. What I really want to focus on today are more of the approaches to learning with a recognition that we need to use the approaches to teaching to connect into them. But if we can today really talk about the skills that we're teaching our students, and then think about and know where to go to find some strategies, to find the playbook as to how to incorporate the approaches to teaching, you're good to go. So with that in mind, the real focus today is thinking communication, social, self-management research, but we know that there's lots of information on how to achieve that with our students. So let's talk about skills, because I think that in the land of IB, there's lots of things that we're expected to be talking about. Learner profile, international mindedness, assessments in COVID. Are we online? Are we offline? How do I do this? So I want to talk about what the ATL piece is before, so that we're clear on it, so that it doesn't get bogged down in this other stuff, but maybe so you can see a through line as to how to get through it. So the ATL is about skills, and they're skills that transfer all the way through the program, but all the way through learning. The IB did not invent these skills. The IB doesn't own these skills. They've done the research and found the best practice on skill-based learning and created a framework. So if anything, when you're talking to your teachers, you want to say, it's a framework of best practice. And so when you are thinking about this framework of best practice, one thing that I think is important is to be able to say, okay, if everybody is talking about the same framework, then at least we can say where we're doing things well and where we're not. So the resistance that sometimes happens with ATL is, well, I'm already doing that, or I teach skills. all good. By the end of today, what I'm hoping is that you can see the value of your whole school embracing this framework so that you're speaking a common language. The second point on here is the key aspect of ATL. The point of teaching skills is that kids can then do it themselves. So it's not about me saying, okay, we're going to do some research today. You want students to understand the how of the research. So you want students to be able to say, today I went on the online, I researched a particular topic, I evaluated where those sources came from. That's the transfer. If they can name what they're doing, then they can probably do it again. And I'm really going to emphasize that as a significant part of planning with ATL in mind, is the importance of a teacher and a student being able to name the skill that they're working on. And that leads to that last question there, which is, when we're teaching, are you teaching students to repeat what I say or to be able to work independently? And I think especially in this particular context, it's become so important that students can work independently. And I think that holding on to this ATL framework is actually a really great solution to some of the problems that, that we're facing right now in pandemic education. So with that in mind, I also think it's important that we address that in this particular moment, doing professional development around ATL, is that we are also doing professional development among all of us and with our students in mind who have experienced trauma, who've had to do learning in an independent way, which they haven't done before. We haven't been so isolated before as teachers. There's so much uncertainty. There's so much, our confidence, I think everybody's confidence has been challenged a little bit in this particular experience, and there's a lot of pressure. So I want to acknowledge the significance of that and to say the goal for today is for you to see this as a way to ease some of that pressure, not as something you need to add on top of what you are already doing. So there are 4 resources that are available to you. And what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to skip the next slide and come back to it. And I'm going to actually show you this, stop sharing my screen for a second, put those documents into the chat so that you can have them, and then we'll regroup for a second. Because I would say, and I know many of you have these documents, I just want you to have them at the ready, and some of you don't, and it doesn't really matter. I have no vested interest in whether or not you like or don't like these documents, but I think it's all we need are these documents to make a big difference when it comes to ATL. So for PYP people, it's the learning and teaching document. For MYP people, it's the principles to practice document. And for DP people, there's 2 that I'm going to give you. It's going to be the ATL and the DP, as well as the self-reflection tool. But I'm going to ask that everybody pay attention to this self-reflection tool. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second. And over here, I'm going to, if you can open, whoops. Hold on here. I seem to have some technical difficulties here. Okay. I am going to, if you can all open up the chat to make sure that you can see it. I'm going to put some documents in there, and then you should just be able to open them on your screen. So first one, PYP. And I would say, actually, to be honest, everybody may want that. So that first document is for the PYP. This next one is for the MYP. Okay, now DP people, this is for you. Number 3. Whoops, maybe. Hold on. Here it comes. There's the file. If you're not getting the file, let us know, because we can also, there we go. And then the last one that I'm about to send, I want everybody to take. Okay, so the self-reflection tool, it's called Resource 2. It's going to be everybody's Resource 2. Okay, so try and grab those. Now I'm going to give you a little tip. So let me go back. This is like a whole other way of being, these like flipping between screens here. And now you can see the mess of my desktop. So hold on, let's hide that. And we'll go view. Okay, here we go. Okay, so PYP and MYP, I just want you to take a minute. PYP, you're going pages 29 to 37. MYP, you're going 107 to 115. DP, for this moment, what I want you to do is just look at that first document I sent you. So I am going to give you 1 minute to kind of find your bearings in there, to see where it is. Some of you have probably already done this. You're in the advanced group already. Some of you, this is new territory. That's awesome. It doesn't matter if you know these documents or not. Oops, let's go back, sorry. I'm just gonna pop back like this for a second. Okay. Are we having some trouble? Yes, okay, so I've paused for the chat. This is my problem. Sometimes I just monologue and I forget that, you know, there's other people on the other end here. If you cannot find what you are looking for, you can get them on my IB. I'm gonna try one more time with the MYP doc. There's the MYP one and the PYP one. See how that goes. And it's not a big deal. Yeah, you do have to wait for it to download. So I've uploaded the PDF, then you need to click on it. It should download. Okay, so we're gonna think of these documents as being everything you need to know, the how-to guide of ATL. And so I'll just show them again in case you're having trouble. And it's okay, like for today, if you can't download them, it doesn't matter. Just know that they're there and know that that's what you want. And remember, I will share this PowerPoint with the coordinators and they can send it out or you can email me and then you've got what you need. So don't worry about that at all. And really for today, it's more of a survey of it anyway, but I just want you to know where to go. So here's what I think about these documents. I think that everything you need to know about figuring out what ATL is as it relates to what you teach is in there. And in fact, there's some really great teaching strategies that you can find if you flag them and start going into them. So I think sometimes we can easily get bogged down in IB documents and just kind of get to saturation. So what I'm telling you is this is the place to go. So all of those are what you need. Now, when we think about ATL, we have all of the skills and then we also need some strategies. So the reason why I like this self-reflection tool, and I'm just gonna put that up on the screen here. Just let me stop for a second and do a little switch. Okay, that should be it. Okay, so this document here, don't look at it as being about, don't look at this as being forget the 5-year review that's attached to, don't look at it as it, even in terms of its intent. Instead, I want you to think of this as being a playbook for ATL teaching. And so if we scroll through here, it has in it, for example, we're talking about thinking skills. Now it says it's for DP students. I'm going to argue you could use this at all levels. If you go through here, it has very succinct ways in which you can go about employing thinking skills in your classroom. So for example, have you asked students to formulate a reasoned argument to support their opinion or conclusion? I can imagine what that looks like in kindergarten. I can see what it looks like in 6th grade. I can see what it looks like for a senior. So it's a spiraling skill, but to me, I really love this document as a way to say, okay, what am I doing what are my teachers doing? And so today I'm sort of coming at this rightly or wrongly with the assumption that you want to know kind of how to start. Some of you are further along, but to me, what I can imagine is this document can be used by a PLC team, by a learning group, by a grade level team. And to me, it's a little bit of a self check. Like sometimes I'll look at it and say, am I using this document? Like, have I done that lately? Like, when's the last time I said, for example, have I done a reflection activity? Like, am I doing that like 5 days a week? In which case, there are other ways to do thinking skills. So what I would hope when you look at this document, and I'm going to get you to take a minute to do that in a second, is what I would hope when you look at this is, one, you see yourself in it. You say, oh, I'm doing that. I've just never put it in the category of thinking skills. Or, oh, I've never really thought of what I'm doing there as being research. So whether it's, recording sources in steps, I've not thought of that as actually being research. Or your academic honesty conversation is about research. So to me, it's like a way to frame what I'm already doing, and to go back to the big point, going back to like the importance of the language. So what I want you to do right now, and in a minute, we're going to go into some breakout rooms, but what I want you to do is take a look at this document, and it doesn't matter what level you are. And I want you to find something on the first 5 pages. So just with the skills. And what I want you to do is to be ready to share how you did that work in your classroom recently. So whether it was, and that can be your online classroom, or that can be in person, whatever your context is. But I want you to be able to say, I did this skill in this context. And we're going to think of the first thing you're going to do in your breakout room is you're going to have a little bit of a potluck. You're going to share, this is the skill I did, this is how I did it. Because to me, that's really how you start doing good ATL work, is you share what you're doing and you attach it to the framework. So you all have 2 minutes right now to find your skill and to think about the way in which you've already done that work.
Let me go ahead and do the breakout.
Not quite, because I need to give a task.
And this one is a random, correct?
Yeah.
6 to 7 per room.
Yeah, that'd be perfect. I'm seeing that some of you aren't getting getting the links to open. That's okay. Don't worry about it. We're going to make sure that you have access to all of the documents. For today, I'm going to go back and I'm going to share my screen again with the document. If you can't flip through, just pick one of the skills that are on the screen and think about how you're talking about it. And I see this comment about using it every session. I think that is a common fear. It's daunting, but I actually think probably you're already doing it. It's just a matter of attaching to it. Anyway, I'm having 2 simultaneous lines of thought here. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to share this. So if you can't open the document, you're going to do something on communication skills. And I want you to find a lesson that attaches right here to one of these skills. Think about a time that you did it. We have 1 more minute before I'm going to get you into a breakout. All right. So see, I just made a mid session revision already. What I want you to do first when you go into your breakout room, introduce yourselves because you may not know each other. And then I want you to talk about the skill that you just found and how you already do it. Because I think one of the ways in which this all feels overwhelming is it feels like another thing to do. So the reason for this little potluck is to say you're already doing it, you just need to talk about it. So that's first. Share, maybe you want to do an introduction and what's the skill that you're attaching to that you've done, or if you're not teaching, that you've seen, however you want to do that. Then what I would like you to do is pick 2 of the skills, and I want you to talk about what it looks like at your level. So you're not going to get to all of them, but maybe you're going to do thinking and social skills. Talk about what does it look like at PYP, MYP, DP, CP, wherever you are. What's your best example of how you teach it? And how do you know your students can do this work? So one tip I'm going to give you is that, unless I'm wrong, I don't think we can push this slide into the breakout. So if you could take a photo of this slide, somebody, with your phone, then at least you'll have the questions. I will cut and paste the questions into the chat, but I think you also get new chats as you go. So if you think you're going to forget, take a photo of this screen right now. Step 1, potluck. Step 2, pick 2 skills. Talk about what it looks like. What's your best example of how to teach it? How do you know if students can do this work? We're going to give you 15 minutes to do this. So at 11:15, all the breakout rooms will close and you'll come back, but I'll try and cycle through them as we go. If you have questions, I want you to post them in the chat. And otherwise, oh, we can broadcast it into the breakout room. Perfect. All right. And thank you, Wendy, for that. Okay, I'm going to stop the share. Go ahead and do the breakouts, and we're good to go. All right, it looks like we have everybody back. Am I right on that? I know that there's like a little warning, and then it's sort of an abrupt thing to end these breakout groups. So I was able to cycle into probably half of them. And a couple of things that I heard that I think are really valid are that, first of all, if you give people a list, everybody can attach to these skills. Like there was no struggle to find, oh, I'm doing that. Oh, I'm doing that. Oh, I'm doing that. So depending on your role, if you're in a leadership role in your school, maybe that's all you do this year. You know, if you're trying to say, I need to do a little work on ATL, maybe you give people the list, maybe it's part of the list, maybe it's the checklist, and you say, listen, we need to be talking about ATL. We know we're already doing it. Let's celebrate what's going well here. And so, and at my school here in Halifax, we did that a couple of years ago. We had, and of course it was in person, but I still think it could actually be a really nice online PD if that's something that you're responsible for, where you say, listen, I want you to think about the best lesson you've done so far online, put people into groups. First of all, just have them share it, and then say, now attach to the ATL that you're already doing. Because it's not that we need to invent anything, it's just that we need to really be able to talk about what is already happening. So if you feel like ATL is something you want to address this year, whether it's because you know you have to, or because you think it would work for your teachers, or because it's something that's part of your school goal, start by celebrating what you're already done and just embed in embed in the framework.
Heather, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Is it possible to, if your name has not been modified yet, to include your program, or your name doesn't have as a phone number, or something that's not clear, if you could just put in the message in the chat, list your program and the name that you would like, that would be awesome, just for grouping purposes. Unfortunately, you're not able to rename yourself because of the way I did the settings when we set this up. So if your name has not been modified, include your program, that would be really helpful if you could drop that in now. Thank you. Just people who have not been fixed. Sorry.
No worries. It's all good. Second thing I heard was that people are struggling to form relationships in the way that they normally would. And I think that that's true. And I would say, in Nova Scotia, where I am, we're back to school 100%. I had a class of 32 students in person this morning. Everyone's in masks, everyone's in rows. So even in that setting, I feel like I don't have the same vibe going in my classroom. There's still a barrier there, and we're not online. So I know that being online makes it even more difficult. So I think too, like, let's not get bogged down with thinking about the ATL skills, but maybe if you feel like that's kind of where you're struggling, focus on communication or focus on social skills and say, how do I really make that my goal? Or how do I ask my teachers to say, you know what, the kids are missing the interaction. Let's just make sure we're doing a lot of social skills in this context this month. And then I heard a comment, a couple of comments about like how this framework sometimes competes with other frameworks. And I think the worst thing you could do right now, the worst thing we can all do, is ask teachers to do more than what they're already doing, because what they're already doing is a lot. It's a huge ask to be a teacher right now in this time in history. But if you can find a way for this to supplement, and only you're going to know the context you're in, whether you're the teacher, whether you're the coordinator, whether you're the, whatever your role is. But if you know what your teachers are struggling with, there may be, whether it's the checklist or these other documents, ways for you to do it. And I'm going to give you an example. So I'm going to jump back to the PowerPoint here. This here, okay, let's just, is from the PYP, and it's about self-management skills. And I feel like, if nothing else, this is what we all need right now, whether it's an adult, whether it's a 4-year-old, whether it's a 14-year-old, figuring out how to be mindful, persevere, manage our emotions, manage our motivation, and be resilient is the challenge of being a student and a teacher right now. So if you want nothing else from today, I would say take this slide and say, how do we elevate conversations with our students and with each other about how to do this particular skill? And I think, and this is where the language piece comes in, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but I think if everybody in your school, if you feel like this is something that people are really struggling with, if everybody in your school was talking about, you know what, this week, we're all going to teach you a different strategy to support you in your concentration and overcoming distraction. And even if you did that and said, listen, this week could, in your class, when you have 5 minutes, can you talk about a strategy for doing that? And if everybody says it and everybody's talking about it, then students can say, okay, I learned something for self-management this week. And I don't think it's a big ask. And I do think it's just about hearing it from a number of different people. It could be that simple, but I think that the self-management piece is actually the most important one right now. So by way of example, this is here. I would say that PYP document has the skills broken down this way. And if you feel like this could be useful to you, make sure you get that. And on the IB Program Resource Center, you have access to all the documents for all the different programs. So if you just click on the PYP column and go in and get the teaching and learning document, you might find there's something in there for you. By the same token, you may find that what's in that checklist that I gave you from the DP level is what you need. There's also really great stuff in the MYP. And this comes back to, as well, maybe you want to look at self-management, like what does it say from PYP all the way through? And I started to talk about this as people were coming back in. It might be that it might be with self-management, maybe it's with research where you're like, I don't think my students are ready for this level, but I bet that there's something at the other level. So if you feel like, I'll give a different example. If you want to work on research, check out what the PYP has for research if you're a DP teacher, because maybe that's the scaffolding that you need. Anyway, what I want to move into next is actually a strategy for planning with the ATL in mind. And some of you may be able to and ready and have the mental headspace and want to jump into this tomorrow. And some of you may just sort of tuck this away and say, I might come back to that next semester. And some of you might say, that's not going to work for me and I'm going to disregard it. It doesn't really matter. This is just one way to really kind of think about how ATL can be woven in to your planning process or your teacher's planning process in a way that I don't think is a huge add-on. So when I think about it and work with teachers on this, these are the 5 questions that I ask. The first question is, what's the content I want to teach? Because I think there's always content we're trying to teach, even though we know it's not the most important thing. At the end of the day, there's still something you're going to teach students in the context of everything else. And so ask that question first. Then say, okay, what's the skill, the approach to learning I want students to learn with this content? So maybe today I'm teaching a science concept and I'm going to work on thinking skills with them. And maybe you go to your little checklist and say, okay, the thinking skill I'm really going to pop out, I could teach this content by using this thinking skill. Once you're ready to really fold in the next step, you could also then say, what's the approach to teaching I will use? Because in all of those documents, all the 60 approaches to teaching are also listed with strategies. All of that is sort of in the design. I would say implicitly, we do step 2 and 3 all the time without naming it. So if you want your teachers to start naming it, maybe it's something very simple, like just list which of the approaches to learning are you doing. But I just think the act of naming it makes it significant. But to me, the difference between I'm a teacher and I do a lot of this stuff, and the difference between that and in my school, students are really building their approaches to learning skills is with question 4, which is how do I ensure that the students understand the relationship between the content, the approach, the skill? Like, how do students, and I heard somebody say this, and I'm sorry I didn't write down your name, but somebody was talking when I happened to be in there, and I'm sure others did too. It's not the what of the lesson, it's like, why am I doing it this way? Because at the end of the lesson, you want a student to say, today I was able to learn about the protagonist in my book, and I also worked on my communication skills. And I think that the skill work is already there. So whether you're doing like a partner talk in a breakout room or a turn and talk in a classroom, or whether you're having a student in a math classroom kind of break down, here's the thinking, I showed my work, that's a thinking skill. It's a matter of starting to get students to name it. So I think the question is, how do I know that kids will do it? And there's a lot of ways to do that. I mean, sometimes it's very simple as if you want students, you could put up like, here's what we're going to learn today. Here's the learning target. Here's the skill we're practicing. Or you can have students at the end of class say, listen, today we communicated in a whole bunch of different ways. Tell me how you did that. What were some of the strategies? What worked, what didn't work? I don't think it needs to be a lot, but to me, the success in transfer is first that kids can identify what they did. So let me just pop to the next slide. So to me, so first of all, these are teacher questions, just in terms of the design. And I think we already do it. But I think the key is to pop it out and to name it if you want the work to kind of permeate your building. But here's another way to think about it. We always have content. We teach it somehow. We know the kids are doing something with the content. And so then what we want is for students to understand the connection. And I would say initially the approach piece, like what we're doing to elicit that, they don't necessarily need to understand that initially. Over time, I think they'll grow to understand it. But I think if students could say, okay, today, this is what we learned, and this is the skill we learned with it, I think you'll see a lot of growth in terms of their understanding of their own learning. In a lot of ways, ATL is just metacognition, you know, from the student perspective. It's like them understanding how they learn And in a way, it's good reflection as well. So what I want you to think about, and this to me, I sort of have the same slide 4 times here, but I do think that those 5 questions are the key to this work. And I think that they're not different questions than we're already answering. It's just about the language. So what I'm going to get you to do is you're going to go into a breakout again. We're going to give you about 20 minutes. This time you're going to be with people who are at the same level as you rather than mixed groups. And I want you to think through, what would it take to shift to designing and supporting lessons with ATL in mind? What's an example that you could do of a lesson? So it might be the lesson you just talked about. Like, how do you kind of reconfigure it to answer these questions? But most importantly, what can you do to ensure students are aware of it? Because I think that's the kicker. That's the difference between good teaching of ATL and really successful teaching of ATL, is when the students understand all of that. Again, I would suggest take a photo of this slide and feel free to let the conversation deviate, because I know that some of you have different roles, you have different issues, but just keeping this in mind, whatever your role is. How do you move ATL in a way that's meaningful in your school? So right now it's 11:30, so we'll go till about 10 to 12. And I think at that point, we'll ask for some feedback from the group. So nominate somebody who can talk to the big group. We probably won't be able to hear from everybody, but it would be nice to hear from a few.
Guys, listen, if you do not have a name next to your program, like, a program next to your name, if you could please drop that into the chat now, and I will get you assigned once I know where to place you. So, but everybody else is grouped by program, and it'll be 20 minutes, and I will get to work on this. So if you are not in a group immediately, it's just because we're going to fix your information.
All right. On that note, let's dive back in here. So what I would like to do is actually just hear from a couple of people. I have the questions up here, but if you want to really just, if somebody wants to take the mic, talk about either what you're already doing, because I did hear some things that people are doing that are really innovative that make this work, or what would you need to do, and specifically the student-centered piece, like how does that work, or whatever was interesting that came up in your conversation. So anybody want to jump in? Go for it.
I'll start and share some things that we talked about that I thought would be really helpful. And we all talked about learning targets that you had addressed earlier as being something that teachers were really getting used to, or being required to make sure that they list at the board or at the beginning of a lesson, this is what to expect. We thought that a nice piece would be to add just to that learning target a skill, a reflection about a skill, an identification of what skills being focused on. And that would be one very specific way that skills would come more to the forefront of the conversation. Another idea about that is at the end of a unit or at the end of a lesson, an exit ticket being about a reflection of the skill that you developed or got better at through that day's lesson. So those were two like tangibles. That's great.
Those are really nice. I definitely think the learning target, the reflection, that's all good. I know there were some hands up there and somehow I've lost that on my screen. So
okay, that will be me. So we actually require teachers, in addition to writing their learning targets, I'm Nani, to make sure that the second sentence says how they will actually achieve the learning target, and that's the skills. And for this virtual learning, as sixth graders, the teachers have been focused on reading, writing, and discussion, which is communication. And we actually, teachers have to, when I jump into classrooms, that's the only evidence I'm looking for. for the use of skills, because those skills are transferred. So teachers have to stop and say, now I'm going to stop, so you can jot your thinking down. So the kids write, and they write their thoughts. And then on Fridays for our Panther time, the kids have all their journals. So they have electronic notebooks. But for our Panther time, because we're an avid school, every teacher stops and the kids give each other feedback on their notebooks. So they pair them up, and that's truly designed to give teachers time away from teaching on Friday Panther time. But the kids they have a checklist, and they have to see evidence of the thinking that the kids have written down. And then that's time also for the kids to have discussion. And they use gallery walk. They use the Padlet for the gallery walk, where the kids give each other feedback. And it's just very nice to see. But the quarter's ending next week, but our teachers have, they've identified skills that when we have our vertical articulation next week, that the teachers are seeing improvement from first quarter to, they want to see the growth of those skills. So it's just been very specific, but that's truly what we look for when we are in the classroom. That's all we look, evidence of using the skills to transfer the learning.
That's great. Thank you. There's somebody, I see you with your hand, yellow t-shirt.
That's me, Kit Ronowski. It's great to see everyone. And we talked about a lot about sharing. We talked, thank you. We talked a lot about sharing different resources to do this. We talked a lot about that in order to teach the skills successfully. One thing is that really stressing the backward design. Teachers need to decide on their summative assessment first, and then figure out what skills in order to reach that 7-8 level of achievement, in order for them to be communicators, to be to show the highest level of investigation, what skill they need to develop, and then selecting the strategy that to use. And we talked about, there's these just great resources. Lenny Dutton put together this wonderful spreadsheet of just an encyclopedic number of ATL strategies that can be used and resources that can be used. And other folks shared wonderful research resources as well, from Allison Yang Weebly that has lots of different activities, and a taolearn.com that has another set of ATL activities. So there's tons of stuff out there. But the key thing is we don't want to overwhelm our teachers with too many resources, too many strategies. That's where that approach is teaching, that collaboration really comes into play, because we have to be selective in what are we going to use to teach the self-management skills, those effective skills, those transfer skills. We've got to be specific on those skills. They're going to help kids succeed, all our kids succeed at the highest levels on those summative assessments, and make sure that our skills, the resources we are offering, are directing teachers to help kids succeed, remove those barriers to learning, to make sure they succeed at the highest levels.
Awesome, thank you. MYP Nani, am I saying your name right? I see a hand. Or did you already went, I think. Anybody else want to speak? What I want to do, and you can chime in again later. I do see all this sort of sharing of resources. I think that that's great. One thing that the IB has is a series of videos about ATL and what it looks like in the classroom. And I find them to be effective for teachers to see kind of how it plays out, and also for the student engagement. Now, I looked and I could not find, and I might be wrong on this, but I couldn't find any that were PYP and MYP. So I'm just going to show you one that's DP. But what I want you to pay attention to is the way that the students specifically speak to the skills. And I think that this emphasizes what I'm hearing from all of you, but also what's really important with this work is that the first step is the teachers. And I saw a comment in here, the teacher does need to model it, but the student needs to know what they're receiving. So this is one, it's a self-management one. And so if you just give me 1 second, I'll flip the screen and put this on for you. Hold on here. Okay.
School in Toronto was founded in 1903, and we became an IB school in 2000.
You want to redo, Heather, with audio? Double check you click that box.
Science here. I teach diploma chemistry, theory of knowledge, and I'm also on the extended SE leadership team. So the approaches to teaching.
Heather,
learning skills that I'm particularly
Heather, go ahead and restart it and check the box because we're not hearing audio.
Okay. Okay. Oh, sorry about that.
It's all right.
All right, here, let's try again. All right. I'm going to tell you where to get all of these videos because there's about 10 of them, if not more. So, oh, I see. I missed that button. Sorry. Okay, let's try this again. Oops. Of course, I closed the video in that excitement, so just a second here. Okay, now let's get this right.
Branksome Hall School in Toronto was founded in 1903, and we became an IB school in 2003. My name is Oksana Yayechnik. I'm the head of science here. I teach diploma chemistry, theory of knowledge, and I'm also on the extended essay leadership team. So the approaches to teaching and approaches to learning skill that I'm particularly interested in is the self-management skills, whether it's preparation for tests or preparation for exams, reducing their anxiety in terms of test taking, and also giving them some tools with which they could prepare maybe in a more proficient way for their next task. So our first task this afternoon is, I would call it a reflective task. First thing you're going to do is you are going to discuss some of the strategies that you used in terms of preparing for this test.
So I found using the syllabus as a starting point and then making cue cards from the syllabus was a good way to make my notes for the test.
I used a very similar sort of thing, except instead of using cue cards, I used a PowerPoint, which I found really helpful.
Yeah. Like the study guide is so helpful.
Yeah. I want you also to think about how you use the time, because I think that was a good question, Kaylin. I think you were trying to really figure out what Kate did in that time. And it's not how long you spend, it's how you spend the time. So in the first part of the lesson, you saw some of the students sharing their strategies for test taking, note taking, and also really helping in developing proficiency in understanding some of the chemical concepts.
And also going through the textbook, going through past exam questions, review questions. You don't always necessarily think that how you study is wrong, per se. So it's really helpful for someone to tell you in ways in which they study so that you can get different ideas of ways that you could improve for next time for test taking.
I find it really helpful to have someone else ask me questions and then try and explain it to them, because then I feel like I've really got a good grasp on it if I can explain it to someone else.
Okay, so ladies, I hope that was a useful exercise. So going on to our second activity. This is going to be very much a student-directed approach. I will be giving them a scaffold to help in their learning, and they're really going to be doing some peer teaching, evaluating their processes. So the first activity, you're going to do a little bit of review of writing equations, because the first tool is to write an equation which is a balanced chemical equation. So off you go.
It's the decomposition of zinc carbonate ZnCO3 into copper oxide ZnO and carbon dioxide CO2.
So the question was zinc carbonate into copper oxide. So
I think they responded pretty well. They were already prepared in some way by having done a self-reflection and an analysis on their strategies in terms of preparation for this particular test, and also some of the potential strategies that they might use in terms of their future assignments.
Oh, 3, 1, 2, 3, C.
Not only this lesson encouraged us to work in groups, but encouraged us to ask questions. And so while we were in the groups, we were asking our friends, oh, how did you do this question? Or asking the teacher, can I get a little help with this? And I think that's something that's really important in high school, is to ask questions, as I learned a lot today about different strategies that I wouldn't have realized if I hadn't asked my friends those questions.
No, it's KOH. So we're just trying to find massive iron.
Or H's, hydrogens. We just got some chart paper, we got our questions, and as collaborative, we split up into 2. So we were put into a group of 4, and each group of 2 would start answering the question, and then we would go back and compare our answers and see how each of us went through the process step by step.
We learned not only how to do the problems, but how to approach them in different ways and find out which way works out best for you.
One of the things I will do in future classes is actually a very similar activity, and actually see how some of these new strategies worked for them. So obviously we need some time, they need to try things out, they need to maybe modify the strategy. So I'll be very interested in doing a follow-up in terms of how some of these new strategies worked for their learning.
Okay, what I want to show you, for those of you who haven't seen these videos before, is that there's a whole bunch. So I'm just going to show you where to find them, and then I'm going to, we'll do another 15 minutes and then we'll be done for today. But I'm just going to do a little share here. So what you're seeing now, I believe, is the Program Resource Center. So that is, if you log into My IB, this is where you would be. If you click, so first of all, if you want the PYP information, it's in teaching. If you go into the MYP, you can find it. It's within the documents. I'm going to show you where to find these videos in the CP, or in the DP rather. So if you go into view all DP resources, you can either hit the learning and teaching tab or scroll down. Either way, you're going to get there. And then this document here where it says approaches to teaching and learning in the DP, this website is actually really great. And so when here, you can click on the videos, and in here, the video I showed you is here, but if you scroll through, there are many pages of videos with a whole bunch of different focuses. And I think that they're actually really great in terms of things that you can show to your teachers, things that you can show to students that show how these things come alive. So if you are somebody who's responsible for putting together some professional development around this, I would use this video. I would use some of these videos. I would use that checklist, and then whatever other documents are relevant to you. If we had more time, I'd show you a few more, but you know, depending on what you need, that's a great place to go. So what I want to do is kind of pull together. I want to thank you for the people who shared. I know that people are going to have to kind of start to move on to the next phase of their day. But what I want for the last 15 minutes, I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint here. Okay, so I heard many of these strategies, but I just want to talk through different levels of implementation or different things to consider for yourself. So we talked about the idea that you could give a teacher a skill to work on, or ask all teachers to talk about it across a week. So perhaps it's managing stress and anxiety as a self-management skill. As a side note, I do think that showing students that that is a skill within a suite of skills that are relevant to being a good student remove some of the stigma that I think some students have about being anxious or about not being able to manage their time. I think often we ask kids to go manage their time, but we don't tell them what that means. So I think that, and that's a whole other line of conversation, but I do think if we start showing students that actually the IB says this is a whole category of skills that's as important as learning how to research, that's valuable. The second thing that can work is asking teachers to identify a skill they're going to work on each week or each day. I did hear one school talking about how they put it in a newsletter and they pair it with a learner profile, and I think that's awesome. It depends on where you are in this continuum of implementation. But the other thing you could do is if you feel like your teachers are burnt out and you feel like your students are interested, you could give the student-facing checklist to the students and say, I want you to document what skills are you working on across a week, across a month. There are several of them, to be honest. If you just Google student-facing ATL checklist, there's a ton of them that people have made. But last year, as a strategy with our incoming IB diploma students, we gave them a list of, we don't expect you to come with this, but we expect you to leave with this, and starting to do reflection around their development of the skills. And so much like the teacher facing checklist, and I can share, I'll just share a link to a Google Drive with this, and I'll put that video in and kind of everything, and I'll ask the coordinators to kind of send that out. But if you felt like you wanted it just to be about your students identifying things, I think that can also be valuable for the older ones. I know the little ones, that's less so, but I still think you could do a checklist on a more condensed version, like this week I want to. Then you're not asking your teachers to do something, you're asking your students to really become aware of it. I think that can be effective. And then I also think that teacher checklist, so there was another group of teachers who I worked with who decided to take that self-evaluation, that checklist of things, and as a department they said, okay, the English teachers are all going to work on these 4 skills over the next 2 weeks, and they did it that way. And I mean, there's so many other ways to cross-cut all of this, but I think that and I know that you're all doing a wide range of these things. So what I'm going to ask you to do is, I'm going to skip that, and I'm going to skip that. I want you to think about these questions. I want you to think about, what do you need to do in order to continue this work? What questions do you have? Who can help you? I mean that sort of at your school level. And what I'm going to ask you to do is to go back into the last breakout room you were in. I think those are still listed there. And I just want you to come up with a, like, here's what I'm going to do next as it relates to ATL. I am going to give somebody else this checklist. I'm going to do a ATL potluck of here's my best lesson and here's how it connects to ATL, or I am going to, whatever it is, I want to put a plan for what's going to come next, because it's Friday afternoon and we're going to do 12 different things, and then it's going to be the weekend, and then you're going to forget. So what I want you to do is to have a little 5-minute reflection of, here's my plan, write it down. Your future self is going to thank you. Even if all you do is write down, here are the list of the documents I need to go back to, and we'll pull you back at 25 after. Okay, go.